Biztech's marketing show. I'm Brian Fernandez, and today we're going to talk to a company which is really one of the pioneers of digital marketing and the internet. That company is Yahoo. But first, let's set some context and set the stage for looking at the industry in 2024. Now, looking back since the late 90s, really businesses have relied on third-party cookies to support their business. And this is from everything from identifying users to providing a more personalized user experience in advertising, market research, online sales and analytics, and a lot more. But the business landscape is changing now. It's undergoing a significant shift away from cookies. Now, the shift is coming, though, as people are spending more and more time online, now resulting in a bigger digital representation as part of a customer's or user's identity. But at the same time, customers and users, individuals like you and me, are more and more concerned about data privacy. So to balance this, businesses have now got to figure out how they can bridge the gap between knowing the customer better, but then also respecting their privacy. Now, to unpack this complexity and to give us an idea of where the industry is heading, our guest today is Dan Richardson. He's the Director and Head of Data Insights Australia and Southeast Asia at Yahoo. Now, Dan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having me.
Now, Dan, for a start, give us an overview of what Yahoo is like in 2024 and what its Australia, Southeast Asia footprint looks like.
Well, Yahoo in 2024 is all about connecting people via our advertising platforms and our consumer properties. You'll know Yahoo Finance, of course, mail, news, lifestyle, sport. And the other side of the business, which we deal in specifically in my team, is all about using data to connect people to the right ad at the right time. So we're reaching millions of people, in fact, over 50 million people logged in across the Southeast Asia region and in Australia as well. So there's a lot of work happening to make sure that we're using the right tech to give people the best experience, and it's a fast-moving space.
So give us some insights into the audience of Yahoo in Australia and Southeast Asia. Australia and Southeast Asia has always been traditionally strong markets for Yahoo.
Definitely. So if you think again about people coming to our properties, you've got over 8 million people coming every month in Australia, and you have half the population, at least Singapore, Malaysia, coming to get that information as well. We have around 4 million people logged in Singapore who are using things like Yahoo Mail. So it's a huge utility, but it's also a source of content. And we like to think of each of ourselves as the trusted guide to the web. You mentioned how old or how much history we have at Yahoo, should I say, back from 1995 when David and Jerry introduced the search platform and Yahoo. So we've learned a lot, and we're still engaging a lot of people, but the big focus is on programmatic advertising, which is what my team does.
Okay, so as you said, you lead that data and insights team in the region. Tell us what is top of mind for advertisers in 2024.
Well, there's a lot of changes happening. So if you had to bucket them in 3 areas, it could be one, the changes to technology, particularly browsers, and the use of things such as third-party cookies. The second is regulation, and we've seen an evolution of privacy regulation, be it in Malaysia or Singapore or Australia, starting with a beefing up of the data breach penalties and processes and safeguards, which is good for consumers, and then how that's now expanding to how we look at people's personal data. And the third is the absolute diversification of services in the advertising, technology, and MarTech area as well. So marketers are spoiled for choice, but don't have enough time. So there's so much going on, but I think the big one is really about changes to how we use the internet and tracking and things like cookies.
Okay, so let's talk about cookies now. Cookies were supposed to be phased out, if I'm not mistaken, this year. But I think Google has come up and said that it's going to phase out third-party cookies in Chrome only in 2025. Walk us through the changes that have happened and why this has been delayed. Because I think privacy advocates were looking forward to this, but that's been pushed out a little bit more.
Brian, we've been talking about this for years. I feel like the late blooming actor in identity and cookies, because I'm only just getting a bit more of a airtime. But if you think about how we built the web, it's been really exciting. It's composable, and the common language we used was that piece of script that sits in the browser, the cookie. It's important to differentiate between the first-party cookie, which is generated by the web domain that it sits on, and a third-party cookie, which is generated by someone else. Maybe it's tracking or targeting or one of your partners. But look, the big shift has been that this has really come to the fore in the last 6 to 12 months because of Chrome, and Chrome looking at how they phase out third-party cookies and replace that with more privacy-centric technology. But wake up, it's actually been happening since 2018 with Safari and intelligent tracking prevention. Other browsers followed. So this has actually been happening a really long time. And look, I know the share of Chrome browser, be it in Malaysia or Singapore or Australia, is quite big, but there's a lot of people sitting on Safari or in an iOS system as well that are basically receiving irrelevant ads, and where marketers have been wasting money for years because they can't track or target. So this is nothing new, but it's really come to the fore with Google and their announcement of deprecating third-party cookies. So there's a lot happening, but what I can see is that marketers and people that work with them are still pretty underprepared. There's only a few which have been really advanced with their testing. So there's a lot of work to be done still.
Okay, so then tell us, what are some of the key industry trends that are moving away, obviously, from cooking? So you talked about MarTech and how MarTech is just exploding in the last few years. Give us a sense for the average consumer and also then the average CMO. What are some of the key trends we should be aware of or to look out for?
So I think the key ingredient here is what we would call identity. And how do you actually understand your customer to make sure that if they come into your store or visit your website or purchase something, that you can identify them across the internet and give them the right offer at the right time. Now, traditionally, that was facilitated by things like third-party cookies. But with those things going away, we've really had to work hard, be it a publisher or brand, to replace them with alternative identifiers, things that are based on consent, trust, control, all of the stuff that's really important to a consumer, so you can continue to deliver the right ad and really get to know them. So that's been the big shift. And I think if we look at any consumer at any point in time on the internet, you could be either known, so there might be an identifier on you that's held by the company, or you might be unknown. You might be on a browser that's blocking cookies. That's actually a really big issue. Again, bringing it back to the marketer, if I'm a CMO, what's my return on investment from advertising? I can see if I've reached the right person or delivered a sale or drove someone in store, but only in some areas. In other browsers, it's obfuscated. So the big challenge has been looking at how we use technology to replace third-party cookies with identity that is consent-based, with trust and control and privacy baked in. So that's been a huge focus for us at Yahoo, and what we've been building as both an ad buying platform and then also a publisher, and then also a technology that allows other publishers to connect into our tech as well, or the supply side is what you would call that, just like a marketplace, demand and supply.
Okay, Dan, break down these three areas. So these are your solution suite, right, that you're offering. What are the areas? Break that down for us in terms of how that impacts us, and assume I'm a CMO.
Yeah, so as a CMO, if you're collecting data from your website, if you're collecting it from in-store, all these different sources, what you're really having to do now is figure out, how do we have what's called a federated view or a single view of the customer? You can't use necessarily cookies or tracking to do that anymore. So there is, to go back to your question before, a big investment in marketing technology and identity platforms that allow you to bring together all of these pieces of information, identifiers, and attach a consent-based ID on that, so that you can do things like audience segmentation, so right offer, right time, are they lapsed, are they lapsing, are they high value, and then package that all up and get that fed down to your marketing campaigns, which are being delivered in ad platforms. It's actually a really huge investment, and there are a lot of costs along the way. And not all businesses will actually be able to achieve this. Some will continue to just use what's available in maybe a walled garden, a Meta or a Google, whereas others would like to achieve what we'd look at as omni-channel marketing. So that would include audio or out-of-home ads, which can now be delivered in a programmatic way, connected TVs. So that's really the bigger focus. So if I'm putting my marketer's hat on, I want to understand my customer across everywhere they are and be able to, really get to the heart of what drives them and what drives the sale.
Now, talk to us then around your strategy, particularly now, and I've got to bring attention to the fact that marketing technology has, as we just outlined, has expanded dramatically, but artificial intelligence has also then brought a different dimension to the game. How is that impacting how marketers are able to address their audiences better and get a better return on investment on their marketing dollars?
So look, there are many, many applications of artificial intelligence. I won't pretend to be an expert in all of them, but the way Yahoo's really been focused on this is going back to something I said before. When you're on the internet as a customer, there are two different ways you can be viewed: known or addressable, unknown or non-addressable. Now, a lot of the internet and people in ad tech have been focusing on how do you bolster and grow this addressable audience, using things like customer emails and phone numbers. And it's essentially, for some, it's just a replacement for the third-party cookie. So there are positives for the consumer there, but it's not the full picture. In fact, by next year, when Google introduces their changes, that'll probably only be about 30% of the internet. So where does AI come in? If you're able to produce an addressable audience, people that you know and have consent baked in, you can use that as your panel to train artificial intelligence to go out and find other users with different identifiers, things that are, maybe their device type or time of day, weather, things like that. And you can actually use AI to validate those signals in real time against your panel and start to say, okay, we know someone like Dan or Brian who is into sport or finance. They're age 35 to 44. They're male. We know them from our logged in users, but we've got all these other signals over here. Our AI can start to say, okay, with confidence, we know that person's demography or interest, or maybe even the propensity to buy something for this brand. So AI is helping us validate all that data in real time. And the big picture here is that we're not using third-party cookies. We're not fingerprinting or tracking across sites. So that's actually really interesting, because there really aren't many platforms online that are doing that yet. The way it works is that you look for an identifier on a person who you might know or have consent. And if you don't have that, it just reverts to a third-party cookie. So it's not future-proofed. So That's why we've really been investing in what we call next-gen audiences, which is using AI to look at that big non-addressable opportunity. And that's really where marketers should be paying equal or even more attention, because the bigger the pool, as we know, the lower the cost to reach that user.
And so I want to go back a little bit, Dan, to what you said earlier, and you drew a comparison between the walled gardens versus the open networks like yourself. If I'm a CMO, what should I be cognizant of in these two approaches?
Well, let's explain what the open web is. So when we talk about the open web, we're talking about content which your consumers browse and engage with in return for seeing relevant advertising. Okay, so we know that not everyone wants to spend all of their time in a TikTok or in a YouTube or what have you. Like they're willing to look at websites beyond that. And the open web is really a way of reaching your consumer across millions of websites, but using things like targeting and measurement in an agnostic and omni-channel way. So it's actually the most scalable way of marketing, beyond just investing your money in who you can reach in a Meta or things like that. We know marketers invest in both options. The trick is patching all of that information together to understand if you've reached the same person. So that's really hard. And that probably won't ever be achieved in perfection, but we're having a go at it.
You know, Dan, it's been a fascinating conversation. It's really opened my mind into quite a few different things which I need to do more research on after this show. But Dan, if I'm a CMO in Southeast Asia right now, and I want to get a better return on my marketing dollars, I want to reach my customers better, I want to have a better customer experience for my customers. What are some of the key things I need to look out for in 2024?
Yeah. So as always, it's really important to be able to put your audience in the right segment. So you give them the right ad at the right time, and you can measure that. So, if we're looking at the browser share of Chrome, let's use Chrome as an example, because the big topic is the changes that are happening with that browser and cookies being phased out. Chrome is almost 72% browser share in Malaysia. Now, what you need to be looking for are partners who can reach your audience in a way that's not just focused on replacing the cookie with a logged in user. We need to look at other solutions as well. So I would go back to my point before about AI and next gen, using that panel to train the AI, which is something we're focused on. And also people who are early adopters of initiatives like Google's privacy sandbox. So we know from what we can see, and we're looking at all of the supply side platforms that are coming into our ad buying platform. Remember, you've got the buyer side and supply side. We're looking at that data already. Now, what we can see across markets like Malaysia, Singapore, Australia is there's really less than 100 big website domains, so publishers who have started testing some of Google's APIs yet. One of them would be all around protected audiences. Now, the rest of them, a lot of publishers are not testing that yet. They're not trialing it. So they're playing a bit of game, we'd call it playing a game of chicken. So, waiting for it to happen. So to bring it back, if I'm a marketer, I'd be looking for partners who are actively testing for when cookies are phased out, integrating and testing these APIs from Google's privacy sandbox, but also who have their own solutions baked in, and preferably from what we call first-party data, which is where you have a direct conversation with the consumer. It's not licensed or sub-licensed from brokers. So that brings us back to regulation. Remember, there's been a big focus on data breaches, but the next phase will be around how people's personal data is used and sold, and targeting. So there's a lot to think about, but they're my points.
It's been a fascinating conversation, Dan. Thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show. But before we leave, any final thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with?
Look, I've talked a lot about marketing and advertising culture, technology, but what I would really emphasize is that, if you're working with platforms and agencies, get them involved with the culture of your company around data governance, data ethics, and get some really, good integration there, shared OKRs, so that, if they're working downstream to activate your data and deliver marketing, but you've got your privacy and IT team and tech team sitting a bit upstream, make sure that everyone's on the same page. And we'd call that data culture, and we're putting a lot of time into doing things like data maturity indexing, which is essentially how do you chunk down all the things that need to happen to transform your brand and all of your data assets in the face of these massive changes to tech and regulation. So it's all about collaboration. I guess that's your answer.
Dan, thanks again for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and this has been Biztech's Marketing Show. We've been speaking to Dan Richardson, Director and Head of Data and Insights for Australia and Southeast Asia at Yahoo. This interview will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and third-party websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.